Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. I am really excited to hear your story. You, like many other people that have experienced an NDE, have been through a whole range of emotions. You've learned a lot. Your lives have changed. But before we get into that, could you just give us a bit of background about what led up to that?
Yeah. Do you want to know about the actual event or just how life was before the event?
Yeah, both. Yeah, how
Yeah.
it was before, and then and then what
Okay.
happened.
Yeah. So I was 35 years old. I'm Canadian. I was living in Canada, and most of my adult life, I was working as a ambulance paramedic for about 13 years and living with my long-term partner, living a very typical modern lifestyle. And I wasn't really into self-help or spirituality. I was just living my life and trying to make as much money as I can and keep my house as nice as I could and be social and just do all the things. So my life was pretty normal. And when I was, 35, I was driving. My partner at the time was driving our car. We were in Canada on a high mountain road. And it was one of those roads where it's really skinny and the mountain goes up like this on one side and then drops on the other side with a guardrail. So he was driving along at regular highway speed and an approaching car lost control and came into our lane and was headed straight for us. And we didn't really have an escape route, so he just very quickly swerved the car onto the shoulder on the side of the mountain. But it was gravel. It was really small and skinny, and our car lost control when he hit the gravel, and we spun horizontally, and we missed the car, so we didn't hit him, but we ended up in the other lane and we hit another car. And then as soon as we collided with that other car, we landed upside down on that guardrail. So our car was kind of like half of it was going over the cliff and the other half was on the road, kind of like a seesaw, like a teeter-totter. And so that's where we ended up and landed. And what happened for me, though, that is the near-death experience. So I had been working as a paramedic near that area. I was familiar with that area. And I knew that almost all cars go over the edge. So we actually get a lot of accidents on that road because it's unpredictable. Cars will fly over and just kind of go down the valley, and there are no survivors. So as soon as we lost control, time slowed down for me. It was like, I'm going to die. There was just one thought in my mind. Now it's my turn. So instinctively, I don't know why I did this. Instinctively, I closed my eyes and I leaned back in my seat and I just relaxed my muscles and I decided that I was going to die as peacefully as possible. And I remember just as I kind of went into that mode is when we swerved onto the shoulder. And even though the accident probably lasted a couple of seconds in regular Earth time, it was different for me because as soon as I leaned back and I decided I was okay to die, I had an out of body experience. And I've never had one before. I didn't even know there was a name for such a thing. But what happened was I felt my awareness, kind of like my thoughts, what I was aware of, kind of go very quickly up and away from the body. And the first thing that I noticed was there was no sound there. I couldn't see anything. I had my physical eyes closed, but I couldn't perceive anything. And there was no noise. It was like somebody had kind of covered my ears. All my senses were gone very suddenly. And the most noticeable thing was I didn't have my physical body. And none of us really noticed that we're carrying around 100 or 200 or more pounds all the time. And that's actually kind of heavy after the fact. So it just felt like being as light as a feather with no gravity, with no pushing back, but still being fully me. So again, time slowed down so much. These were the first things I noticed. And then once I adjusted to where I was and what was actually happening, I realized, I remembered that I had been here before. It was a place. And I don't call this heaven. I've always just referred to it as like a threshold or a waiting room of like higher dimensions and more places. And what washed over my experience was I am so relieved to be back. It was like I had been in a movie all my life, and I was so absorbed into that movie that I thought it was so real. And suddenly the curtains finished and everybody walks out of the theater. It's like, oh yeah. So it was like I kind of got to go back to where home started. That's the best way for me to describe it. And so it came with this huge relief and then this feeling, this perceiving of being surrounded by what I'm going to describe as like the presence of God, but made up of soul family, made up of it's hard again, it's hard to put to words, but maybe angels, maybe healthy ancestors, maybe other beings of love and support, and their beingness all together, kind of like in one heart and in one mind in full unity, were there to greet me. And it's also important to mention this part. I didn't feel fully like Amanda, like my ego, like my personality. I just felt like my pure soul. I just felt like innocence and wonder and agelessness, but without any of the hangups or the tension, the anxiety, the issues that surrounded my life as Amanda. And the beings there were looking at me with perception of purity and perception of innocence and wonder and love. There was no sense of judgment, like from myself to Amanda or them to Amanda. It was just this connection soul to soul. And I had the sense that we had known each other, all of these beings and the presence of them and what I call the presence of God, because there was a palpable presence there that's just, again, hard to put to words, but I call it the presence of God, the invisible presence of divinity, where it was like we had known each other for lifetimes. They had known my soul that had been Amanda, but probably many other human identities. And there was just a knowing that I was safe and that I was home. So there was no words exchanged. There wasn't like a message to bring back to humanity or any kind of like, religious instructions or anything like that. It was literally a full experience of being held and remembered and accepted and fully safe outside of space and time. And so, again, it was a few earth seconds of the car accident, but it seemed like I was there a long time, long enough that when I came back, so basically at some point, I opened my eyes. We were in the car upside down and noise came back. It was like somebody gave me my ears back and my sight and everything. But I was still with that full experience of bliss and connection. So I was basically there in spirit time long enough to absorb who and what and that situation was. And I mean, the only way that I guess I would make a comparison is if you're with your family, somebody who you really love, and you're just laughing and talking and you're just absorbing that, nothing else matters. And then you step out the door, but you still have a little bit of that with you, right? So it was like that. So I opened my eyes. My partner was screaming. All we could see was a valley with upside down trees. And I was back in my body. And of course, emergency services came. We were physically okay. I just had a shoulder injury and he had a concussion. But none of what was going on mattered, like the fact that our car was destroyed, that we almost died, that there was a huge police thing. None of it mattered. I was in such a deep place of awe and wonder and really like feeling like I had just been home. That Earth was kind of like this strange place that I knew, but it wasn't as deeply within my awareness and knowledge as this place that I had been.
Oh, well, you're incredibly lucky that you didn't go over that,
Yeah.
that shoulder. I was actually wondering if, they say that there's like an energetic imprint. So if there are accidents that happen in a specific place, that it just keeps triggering other accidents. Do you think that's the case for that section?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point because at some point, I don't remember who it was, but there was somebody who had done a psychic reading after I told this story, and she just said what she could see was kind of like an existing issue with ley lines, an existing issue there that was just a little bit incongruent that had caused so many of these accidents to happen. And then, of course, that imprint would just build the more people that had accidents there.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing that, and it's almost like the Matrix when the bullets are coming, time stands still. After that, what happened? Did you go to the hospital? What happened after that?
Yeah, we went to the local hospital and actually, because everything was fine. I mean, they did a quick check on us and x-rays and that kind of thing. And they basically just sent us home. We didn't have a car. We were a couple hours from home when a friend came to pick us up. And, my partner, he didn't have a out of body experience. He was just extremely traumatized. I mean, right after the accident, he was running down the highway trying to find who caused the accident, just so he really struggled after. But for me, after the fact, I did take a couple months off at work because I was not wanting to lift any patients with my shoulder healing. But other than that, we yeah, I was off work for 4 months. I continued to be in this extremely calm, extremely blissed out state that nobody around me could understand. I didn't talk about it too much because it was just weird. And then we were kind of busy with, lawyers and getting a new car and all that kind of thing. But I didn't notice that over the months, 4 months passed, then 6 months, a real change was coming into our life. So he started to just really develop symptoms of like trauma and post concussion. And our relationship got very difficult. An already difficult relationship got extremely difficult. And I became a lot more interested in spiritual things. I never had heard of NDEs other than, very specific cases from hospitals and books. I didn't know that this kind of thing, out of body experiences could happen and have very similar effects. Um, but I started to lose a lot of interest in things very quickly that were not in alignment with me, things that were actually not that bad. But I was very sensitive to wanting to hold on as much as I could to this state of being. And I noticed little things in my life that would take me out of that. And I didn't want to lose that. I felt so connected to myself and to where I had been. So relationships, friendships that were not life-giving on both sides, that might be toxic. I started to step away from relationships that weren't working very well. And then at about the 1 year point, I ended up quitting my job of 13 years as a paramedic. And the night shifts had just been so hard on my sleep and I was getting chronic pain. So it was just like, I'm out of this. And actually our relationship, him and I split up with him at about the 1 year point as well. And anything else that really felt out of alignment just had to go. So it was like my life just started to change very, very fast in those ways and many more.
I think it's really difficult when you've experienced such bliss to try and recreate that on earth because besides the fact that it's not really able to reflect that, people don't really understand it. So you're trying to talk to somebody who doesn't get it because you wouldn't have got it before either.
That's absolutely correct. If somebody had told me this kind of a thing, I would have thought, well, good for you. And especially if good changes had happened, I would have believed something happened, but there would have been no way to relate to it.
Yeah. So that's a lot of difficult adjusting. And I was actually going to ask you about your relationship because it either would grow you together or it would grow you apart because something like that's so traumatic, you're each going through your own stuff and you're actually the only two that can understand each other, but you had such different experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Also, I was, from people that have passed on before, a lot of people say that they left their body before they actually died, before the moment of impact. So that is something that you already just said, okay, well, it's time to go now. Whether it's happened or not is irrelevant, but it's amazing how naturally it happens.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful part. And I love hearing about how that happened to other people because it was as though if somehow I knew that we were going to survive the crash, I don't think this would have happened. I think I would have just held on and hoped for the best, knowing a shoulder injury was coming, no problem. But because I truly believed with everything in me that we were going over the edge, that really shifted the reality of what happened to me and my awareness and where it went.
Yeah. So the fact that you didn't go over the edge, was that disappointing to you or relieving?
That's also a really good question. When I came back, I actually didn't care either way because I remember sitting on the guardrail waiting for emergency services and just looking at the trees and being like, I am so fortunate and so lucky to have gone there and remembered who I am, where I came from, where I'll go back. Like, I was just so grateful for this opportunity. I didn't even know that it was a possibility in this life for something like this to happen. So at first, I was just so grateful. And there was this naive part of me. It was so real that I wanted to tell my partner, I wanted to tell everybody, I wanted to reassure people that outside of the body that we still are us, we are intact, but we are just the soul part, which is just fine. And so at the beginning, that naive part of me was totally fine with being on earth because then I thought, I can be like this on earth. Like, this is the best way I could imagine being a human, to feel like this. And then after some time passed, as it does, that does not last, at least not in the same way, not in that blissed out way. And so when that contrast of really coming back into the body set in and having to experience life a little bit more the way that I used to, and this part was a little bit more of a memory, that's when I started to experience the contrast and wished many, many times that I could have gone and just stayed there. Absolutely. I still do sometimes.
Now we question why we decided to come to Earth. It will be fun, they said. So you said you went through a very long depression a couple of years afterwards. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So that first year of leaving so many relationships and so many things, I still had that momentum. I still had that momentum of the blissful experience to really drive that. It wasn't difficult to make the changes that would normally be difficult. And so I just kind of kept going with it. And so the first year was fine. And then in year number two, I sold my house. I gave away and sold all my belongings, became a minimalist. I moved into my camper van. And so I was living in my camper van somewhere around 1 to 2 years, again, just in this beautiful state of being. I had my two dogs. We would go visit friends and live in forests in Canada. And I still don't. I'm still a minimalist, but I didn't miss my house. I didn't miss any of my stuff. I was just in this grateful place where I only saw the full side of the glass. Anyways, that started to die down a little bit. I remember specifically, this isn't what caused it, but this was kind of around the time when COVID started. And it was winter. I had actually been in Hawaii, and I came back to Canada because there was going to be some travel issues. And I got back and I was like, something doesn't feel right. I feel like I'm really starting to lose this way of experiencing life that I really love. And I sold the van and I decided to move to Mexico. It was easy to travel there, and they were going to be shortly closing the borders in Canada. So I took care of my paperwork, took care of selling my van. My dogs went to stay with a friend, and I went to Mexico. And around that time, I guess it would have been 2020, August, I remember starting to feel very off. At first, it just felt like regular depression, which I knew a lot about from being a teenager. I was diagnosed with chronic depression and on many, many psychiatric medications for like 8 years. So I knew depression and I could feel it coming for the first time in such a long time. And then it kind of grew into more just a clinical depression. I call it a dark night of the soul that had depression plus a very big spiritual disconnection. So all of that spiritual connection that I had experienced seemed like it was totally gone, and it was replaced from being completely separate from not only God and divinity, but other people, and even like the good parts of myself, the parts that I was proud of, or the parts that I enjoyed. I couldn't even access those things. And so I remember at some point just sitting on a beach in Mexico and looking at people playing and running around and wondering, like, I don't even remember what that feels like. I've been so disconnected for this time. So months passed, and the eating disorder that I used to have as a teenager, that came back. I thought it was long gone. I started to develop a lot of chronic stomach pain, digestive issues. My menstrual cycle ended up having symptoms for like at least 50% of every month, really severe symptoms. And I got nightmares. I'm not somebody who got nightmares as an adult, but I would get really strange, dark, disgusting nightmares. I got ear infections. It was just kind of like everything went from being so lovely to every part of my previous life combined had flared up, things that I had never really dealt with, honestly. And so this period of time lasted for at least 2 years, starting around when COVID started. Again, I was living in Mexico, and I would go from place to place, just trying to find a place that was comfortable. And not only was I having this internal uh, and physical stuff going on, it seemed like I was always in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was like I'd find a landlord, and it would turn into be, this drunk guy that would try and like knock on my door in the middle of the night. And I'd go to another place to live, and it would be another landlord that would go in my room when I wasn't there. And it was just, I thought I was losing, I didn't think I was losing my mind, but I was coming close, because it seemed like no matter where I went, things just went downhill. I would accidentally get money stolen, just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And looking back, I realized that this had to happen this way because all of the unresolved issues in my physical body, my energetic body, and then in like social things that I had never really confronted and faced and stood up for myself, they were all just kind of waiting in the energetic field for me to take care of them. And they all came very fast for me to deal with and face in that 2 year period. And I mean, obviously, like life goes on, and I still get things come up, but never have I experienced so much in just a concentrated time that just seemed so quirky and weird. And the only thing that I can say that kind of like pulled me out of that, I think it's honestly really just when enough things are faced and dealt with, then you kind of can retreat back to something that resembles normal. It was just time and dealing with it, and anything that I just put off and ignored and resisted just made that period of time extend and extend. And during that time, I really didn't have much of a social life. I would read books and articles, watch videos about the dark night of the soul, and try and learn from people who had gone through it and came out the other side, because I really believed that this was going to be going on, who knows, like 10 years, 20 years. I started to lose hope and really despair during that time.
Yeah, that's a hell of a lot to go through. And I think the biggest problem that people have is when you've experienced a trauma, even though it was a blissful trauma for you, there's no safety in the people after the trauma. It's that nobody gets it, nobody understands. Even those that want to help, they can't, because they don't get it. So you kind of feel alienated because you don't want to burden them with something that they can't help you with in any case. Yeah. Do you think it had anything to do with being alone?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that if I had been with somebody else, I think that it probably wouldn't have been as severe. And then I also think that at the same time, I wouldn't have had an opportunity to deal with those things. So they would have still been, some of them at least, would have still been hanging around for the perfect opportunity for me to face them. And I really also felt I'm someone who's always lived with other people. Like my whole life, I've either been with my ex-partner or my family or roommates. And I'm not a loner person. And then it was like I was led into the desert. It was like, metaphorically speaking, it was like once that period of time around COVID hit, it was like everyone else was forced to be by themselves. But I was just like, I can't be around other people. I'm dealing with so much that I don't have the mental energy to even be social and connect, because I've got something else going on that I don't want to burden anyone with. And yeah, about what you said about other people not understanding, if somebody had been talking to me prior to this about a big issue, I wouldn't have understood them either. And something about me just knew that. I knew I needed to be alone and see this through.
Yeah. Well, you have two choices. See it through or don't. you
Yeah.
know, and like you say, the longer you wait, the longer it just hangs around for you to look at. Do you think depression is disconnection from soul? Because so many, you know, the people that work with the talking therapy and stuff like that, they say it's about being stuck on the past. And I'm starting to wonder if depression just is that disconnection.
Hmm. That's a really interesting one. I know that how it was for me, so I can first speak to that. For me, it was definitely disconnection from like, joy and social and like all the good things because there was some black cloud that needed to be dealt with. And there was no way I was going to be able to access the goodness of life unless that was integrated and dealt with. For other people, I'm sure there's a lot of people who could relate to that or who have a very similar experience. And I mean, just back to that good old childhood trauma, whether people remember their childhood trauma who have it or they don't, that energetic imprint, if you've got it, you've got it. And at some point, it's going to start pushing and wanting to be noticed. And that can definitely show up as depression for a lot of people.
Yeah. And you're right about having other people to keep you occupied so that you don't deal with it. It's like that. And I think that is the problem with a lot of people because they've always got somebody to talk to, someone to rely on, TV to go and watch. They never really get round to it because they think I'll deal with it some other day.
Exactly. That would have been me, 100%. If I had a traveling companion, I think I wouldn't have dipped as low, but it would still be there now, somewhere.
And how do you feel now?
Oh, how do I feel now? I feel so much better, but honestly, it's been years. So, like I said, the first couple of years were quite wonderful. What I loved about that, it wasn't real life. It's not a sustainable way to live. But what I loved about it was it showed me that, so many of us go to dark places and have big struggles. Well, there must be something on the other end of the spectrum. So it showed me that there can be so much beauty and connection, not just with other people, but just with yourself and with nature and animals, that does exist. Um, and then, yeah, then going deep dark for at least 2 years, I'd say between 2 and 3 years. And then the last year or two up until now has been what I would call integration. I don't feel like I'm dodging crazy people constantly. My body's working properly. Um, but I'm not who I was before. There's no way. There, if you asked any of my family members, they would probably just nod their head. The who I am now, how I experience life is drastically different based on everything that happened in those 5 years. It's like being shaken up, turned around, a few body parts being pulled off and sewn back together, and you have a completely different operating system. But what life is like now compared to how I was before, I was somebody who is extremely concerned about like how I appeared in like social hierarchy, what kind of car I would drive, the brand of my clothes, what people thought of me at my work, people pleasing behavior, just trying to like get people to like me, all these kind of things. And with this underlying anxiety, this underlying tension of, trying to prevent a catastrophe, trying to control myself and control my partner, like all of this was rumbling beneath the surface of my persona. And based on this car accident and then these years of chaos, there is no way I could be the one who's in control of things. Everything that I could control was removed by force. So nowadays, there's a lot more serenity. There's a lot more silence. There's a lot more time alone, but not because I'm avoiding anyone, but because being with myself is actually the most peaceful place on the planet now. It never was before. Being by myself would probably be like, oh, great, I've got to face my anxiety, got to face my attention. And yeah, and now it's what's more important than anything that has to do with money or social or anything like that, is listening to, what's in alignment for me today. Is there something I need to say yes to? Is there something I should probably say no to? Do I need to sleep an extra hour? You know, um, like how am I taking care of myself? Because I have absolutely nothing to offer to anybody else unless I'm in the best alignment that I can be, which might not look like success or perfection to the outside world, but it's really me and me. It's kind of just resting in that place is a priority now. But my health is so much better. And and my mind is so much better too.
Well, I mean, you need to be friends with yourself first. Do you think that people are deliberately avoiding confronting themselves, or do you think they just don't know how to be alone, or they don't know that they should be?
Yeah, I think that I'm sure everyone's different, but I'm the type of human, I think a lot of us are, we're not going to do the hard things unless we're kind of up against a wall. And so I guess I could have known like before age 35. I guess I could have known I had things to deal with, but it was a lot easier to just like work a few extra shifts and, watch a few more shows on Netflix and invite some company over for a dinner party and fill my life with many things rather than, you know, um, get real with what was underneath the surface. But so I don't think people are like fully avoiding it. I think it just kind of happens because it's just easier to do life. And then when it gets to a point where it's so loud for whatever reason, you don't need to have an out of body experience for these things to really get loud. But when it does, then it starts to be like more of a choice. We can, and that's, I think sometimes when addictions start to get really bad, it starts to be when we're really kind of just fighting with ourselves. And I think that's when a lot of people do start to do shadow work and integration work because it's gotten just so painful. And I think most people are just human and they don't do anything until it gets really, really bad.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that is how we learn. We
Yeah.
have, I'm at a point where I'm saying we don't really always have to suffer to grow, but it seems to be the kickstart.
I love that. I was actually just thinking about that yesterday because we get so used to when we're in a growing phase, we get so used to suffering. And there was a point where I was like, I remember saying, I'm actually okay with the suffering because every time there's like a suffering that's happening in my experience, it's pushing me towards growth in one way or another. It's pushing me towards to be stronger or more compassionate or something like that. And then I think that times come like when we've done that over and over and over, and we've kind of proved to that part of ourself that's the punisher. um, I think that we can really enjoy and rest in a non-suffering way of learning. I think there are different ways about it, and depending on our personality, sometimes we need it
Yeah.
until we don't.
Do you, you've changed so profoundly on the inside. Do you think people changed around you because they saw somebody else, or do you think that you just see them differently?
One thing that did happen was some of my sensitivities turned up. So I wasn't always like a super sensitive person. I didn't have like clear audio, like clairvoyant abilities or anything like that. But this knock to my nervous system opened up some extra sensitivities, and they can even to this day be pretty loud. So when I think about, being around people or whatever, I definitely see them different. Um, Not because I'm looking to see them different, but it's just that my perception has changed a little bit. So it's gotten easier for me to see people's gifts. Um, it's very easy for me to be with somebody who's, sharing something about their life, even if it's the first time I've met them, and see their gifts, see things that are very alive in them, even if they can't see them themselves. So I couldn't see that before as much, or I was just like not focused on that. And then the other thing that's quite honest is sometimes you can see things that people are some of their shadow or some of their angst because you're constantly looking at yourself and you can see so much that's going on within yourself. And so you can see kind of like the full spectrum sometimes of people in a way that you couldn't before. And I would say kind of different types of people come into my life now. Whereas before it was people that were really focused on the same thing as me. So, like people that were like, I remember I really love taking selfies of myself. I remember in my 30s, my 20s, I loved being all over social media and getting likes and comments and really needing attention from that kind of thing. And if I look back, most of the people in my life, that was a big focus of theirs, you know. Um, these kind of things, just normal modern world stuff. But nowadays, the types of people that I come around, they're usually just more focused on the same thing. And yeah, the only thing that's really big that has changed is just seeing their potential, seeing their gifts, and really hoping that they start to see them too. Because yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. Well, we all come from the same place, and everyone's journey is in that direction. We're just at different places in our
Yeah.
journey. Yeah. So what are you doing now?
Yeah, so now I live in Mexico. Actually, in those years, I traveled a lot. I traveled to like 20 different countries, and then I came back to Mexico recently, just in January, so a couple months ago. And right now, I do marketing part-time. I work as a trauma-informed coach, and I'm starting to do psychedelic integration as well in my coaching business. I'm an artist, and yeah, that's what I'm up to now. A little bit of everything, but enjoying life here.
Yeah, it sounds like you're following exactly what's in alignment for you.
Yeah,
And
that's how it feels.
yeah, interesting that you chose to go back to Mexico based on your previous experience.
Yeah, yeah. I found that, I found that it was close enough. I'm from Canada, so it's close enough to go home quickly, and it's really affordable, and a lot of people speak English here, and yeah, I really love it here.
Yeah, I wanted to go to Mexico. Mexico sounded great to me. And then my son was like, no, there's too many gangs and drugs, and you don't want to go there. It's dangerous.
Yeah, the news makes out to be a certain way, but most of the places, I would say most of the places where expats live are not like that at all. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Have you spoken to doctors or scientists about your experience? And if you have, what did they say about it?
Yeah, well, I spoke to my therapist about it. I guess you kind of call her a doctor. She's a psychotherapist. And like that was definitely early on. And again, I was in that very naive stage where she kind of referred to it as magical thinking. And I could tell that she didn't quite get the spiritual part of it. And so I stopped. Yeah, I stopped talking about it for the most part to people like that. Yeah, I haven't talked to any other, doctors or scientists about it. I did do an interview with the IAND group. Yeah, and so they're great. I mean, they're not doctors, but they're people who do understand from more like a research perspective. So that was really nice.
Oh, they've all been there. So
Yeah,
they get it.
I get it.
Do you find that you're gravitating more towards people like that? Okay, so let me tell you my question. I'm finding like I'm trying to help wake people up, but I'm getting the feeling that people that are meant to wake up have already woken up. It's like chasing after, it's more about informing them of the moreness of what there is, rather than the fact that you can wake up. And then there's those who haven't woken up and are not intending to. So do you feel that, do you have that experience as well, or do you think it's just my experience?
No, I have that experience too. I was really, like I said, when right after my accident, I was very motivated to tell anybody and everybody about this, hoping not because I wanted attention for myself, but because I thought if I could feel this, if I could experience this, if even one other person could, like that would make their life. I would hope this for anyone that I loved. So I was kind of coming at it like that, just totally had no idea. Then, obviously that didn't work. Don't do that, Amanda, anymore. And then kind of fast forward to kind of what I've noticed over the last 7 or 8 years, however long it's been. And that it seems like different people that I've talked to, because I've been traveling a lot, talking to so many different people, so many different places. It seems like a lot of people have woken up to something or groups of things. So I'll give you an example. Like I'll meet people who are very awake to, say, different, I want to call them conspiracies, but different government things, different things with big pharma. Like, so there's people who are very awake to those kind of things. They don't think that it's a conspiracy. They're becoming more aware of things that are harmful in our world that don't need to be harmful. But then when it comes to, say, spirituality, that's still a little bit vague for them. And then on the other side, there's people who have had very spiritual experiences, and it's very spiritual experience has been very real to them. Divinity is very real. And yet other things, some of those things that I previously mentioned aren't even in their radar. So it seems like what we are waking up to is kind of, there's so many things to wake up to, but it's different from people to people. But what I will say is if a person hasn't had the waking up starting when it's the topic of spirituality and divinity, there does remain, it seems like there remains still a lot of existential angst below the surface. The same thing we've all had, like for most of the beginning of our life, the fear of death, all that kind of thing. So just waking up to, the bad things that happen in this world that we can hardly believe this is true. That's not yet an experience with waking up to your spiritual nature, which is very different and leads to dramatic transformation in many parts of your life, especially surrender, especially loss of control, letting go, and just kind of like being in a place of allowing things that I can't change. I'm not going to try anymore. Like, so when you see, I feel like when I talk to somebody and they're able to like that's where I'm at, something has happened. So just back to trying to wake people up and that kind of thing, I really do believe it's an organic process, that when a soul is at a point where it's mature enough to kind of take on something big, like letting go of control and kind of like detaching from things in this world and the ego, I think spirit starts to move in them. And it's an internal process. Even if it's triggered by something on the outside, most likely it's not going to be me that's going to trigger them. If it's going to come from the outside, it's going to be a calamity, most likely. And then, but after the calamity, it's like an internal process where that person starts to get pushed on and starts to change. So yeah, I don't talk, like, other than doing like a talk like this with you today, and I have my YouTube channel. In general, like, I don't really talk to too many people about these kinds of things because to them it's not in their reference.
Yeah. And also, it's not a linear journey. It's like everybody's got their different things that we are working towards and working on and looking at different times.
Yeah.
Just going back to the out of body, have you tried to go out of body again? Is that the reason for the psychedelics? Was that different?
Hmm. The psychedelics, that's very interesting because I was like one of those people that like never use drugs. Psychedelics, that was not interesting to me my whole life. And if anything, like I'd have a couple glasses of wine like twice a month. I was just totally raw and sober person. I wasn't against those things. I just had no interest. And then I remember before the accident, I saw a documentary about ayahuasca with Dr. Gabor Mate, and it was in the early days before people didn't talk about this. I think I watched that documentary in 2015. And at the time, they were mostly using it to treat really hardcore drug addicts. So you can imagine the video was these people who was like, don't look well already. Then they're at a psychedelic ceremony and they're like vomiting. And I remember watching that video and thinking, someone's got to be awful screwed up to go to a jungle in a rustic place and spend a week vomiting with people who don't speak English. Like, I was like impressed, but I was like, interesting. And it left my awareness totally. And then after my accident, it was about 1 year or less later, I went to a meditation retreat, just a regular meditation retreat. And it was for 5 days, 3 or 5 days. The lady that was running it, she happened to say at the last day of the retreat that she also was an assistant to an ayahuasca retreat facilitator. And the weirdest thing happened. Like, I got shivers in my body. There was something like I wanted to know more, but it was so weird because I had no interest prior. So I asked her about it and she's like, "Oh, I can give you the contact information. It's a safe place. I've been working with her for years and I love her." And then one thing led to another. So I started to go to ayahuasca ceremonies very regularly for about 2 years. This was also during the 2 years of bliss. And this this is so weird because my plan was to go to one retreat, one ceremony for the purpose of doing inner child work and working on early childhood trauma. I had I was already feeling great. Like I was like, I don't need to try and recreate my accident or anything. But there is this that is now starting to become very obvious that I need to deal with my childhood. So I went to this first retreat and it blew my mind. I had no idea that this type of like biological organic technology exists on Earth. And it was like I was shown what I needed to see in order for me to understand some of my quirks, some of my issues. And then I had this sense from those ceremonies that I had homework to do, that I needed to go home, make certain changes that were very obvious from these visions I had. And I did that. Soon as I went home and made those changes, it was so weird. It was as though no one was even talking about ayahuasca, but I would just like be whatever in my house. And this thought would possess me, not possess me, but I couldn't shake it out of my head. It's time to go back. You're going to have another assignment. And I didn't even have the money. Like, these were pretty expensive. This is like, and I had to take time off work. I was still working. And so I would go back for another retreat. And it was as though the medicine, the spirit of the medicine would pick up with me where we left off the last time and show me more. So this is how it went for 2 years. And I had no idea it was like it was like the mystery school of ayahuasca. And then after about 2 years, it was like the most recent ceremony that I was in 2020. And I just remember going through the ceremony and it was very clear that this was going to be my last one until further notice. Very clear. And so that was my last time using ayahuasca. And so that medicine, I believe, came to me very serendipitously to help me integrate my car accident and to help fast track a lot of the early childhood energy imprints that were very quickly surfacing for me.
Yeah, I used to think that ayahuasca was only for the brave, and then I decided to try it. I only did it once, but it was so intense. It was so intense. I don't know if I'd do it again.
Yeah, that I remember going into ceremonies during that time and being, like when the medicine hits and you realize like, okay, we're in this now for a few hours. There's no coming out anytime soon. And I would say to myself, why did I do this again? Like, am I crazy? Am I trying to punish myself? Like I would go into this thing because it's not everybody experiences it like that. You listen to the people the next day and you're like, were we drinking the same thing? Because like, I can't even talk. I can't even hardly walk. Like, and they're just like, yeah, I saw this hummingbird. And I'm just like, we were not in the same place.
For me, ayahuasca, it felt like time was just like a big ball of wool. It was all just jumbled. Like there is no tomorrow, there's no today. It's all just existing. And it felt like indefinite, but it didn't feel like a good indefinite. It felt like being stuck in something that's just rotating and turning, like you're just never going anywhere. And then I said to myself, I'll be so grateful if I could just wake up tomorrow morning and then there's a day and then there's another day, that there's actually time. And I'm just wondering, did it feel like that for you when you had your NDE, or was that something totally different? Because I cannot think that that is what it would feel like having gone to the other side.
Yeah, I love this. I'm glad you brought it up. And first off, I completely relate to what you're saying about you're describing the kind of like the endless wheel of time. So in the ayahuasca ceremonies, and I would come to learn a little bit more about the planes of reality after, but not before. Most of my ceremonies existed in something similar to what you're saying, but with different themes. And I mean, there were times where I would be in a plane of reality, and it felt like I had been sitting there for months. Like it literally was like I had been there for months. There was another time, just another example where I was having a visionary experience that felt very real. Where it was like I was sitting in a cafe, kind of like the Jetsons. Like I was sitting in a cafe on some planet with someone I knew, a guy in the ceremony. The two of us were just looking at each other, and we were talking, saying, "We have been doing this. We've been hanging out here and meeting up here for millions of years. Like, how long is this going to go? And we would kind of go back and forth. And there was a bit of a despair. I'm not going to lie. Like, it wasn't pleasant. So spent much of the time in there. And then there were very few and very rare, but they were some ceremonies where after being in that type of existence, there was some kind of a test. There was some kind of like a real challenging moment where I had to face a part of myself or just something really hard. And after I would face that test, it would pop me way out of that. So looking back, I recognize that type of a layer of reality as somewhere in the astral realm, where there's still kind of like the mind involved, not a bad place, not a good place, but a dimension, but there's something beyond that. So in my near-death experience, out-of-body experience, as well as in those very rare ayahuasca ceremonies, I would go to a place where it was nothing like that, where it was like, and this has happened once sober as well, by the way. It was like being with everybody that you've ever known and loved across time and space in the most beautiful locations, but very real. Like, I'm saying it like it's dreamy, but it was more real than Earth. It was timeless, but timeless as though we were perceiving and absorbing different aspects of divinity. And we were in so much wonder and so much awe. For example, there was a time where I was side by side with a friend of mine who was also actually in one of these ceremonies. We were looking up and we could see this tower. It was like a golden tower. Even the light, the air was like sparkling, kind of like snowflakes. This tower was made of gold. It was going up, 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 up. It just kept going forever. There was a point where I couldn't even see how far it was going. And every living creature, human, animal that had ever existed, the higher self of those beings were standing on this spiral staircase of this tower. There were angels and birds like hovering in the air. And everybody was kind of looking up because it seemed as though the source of this beauty and this source of this love, and it was coming from above, but nobody could put a form to it. But we were again in a timeless place, but we were just in awe. You could look at one higher self of one human and you could focus in on them and you could see beyond their appearance to their soul, and you could read their soul as though it was like a movie playing. You could see their achievements. You could see the tests that they had passed, the kindness that they had showed people who nobody else saw, but you were looking into their soul. And so when you looked at them, you were kind of taking in the history of the universe, of their soul, all their lifetimes. And you were just like, it would bring me to tears, like even now to talk about that, to be able to see the wonder of just one soul and what they had allowed God to be in them and experience. And this would be, you could zone in on one person or one angel or whatever, and weeks could pass while you were just in awe and wonder. And so this place had a very similar vibration to my near-death experience. I am not sure if my near-death experience kind of opened some kind of a portal to that place where I could access it sometimes through ayahuasca. I was never looking for it. It would just be like I was there. And like I said, I've had one sober out-of-body experience going there as well. So I know that it's not, drug-induced necessarily. Ayahuasca is just the portal, right? But yes to what you experienced and what I've experienced many times in that roundabout thing, but there is a place beyond.
Do you think it depends on your state of mind at the time that you're doing it? Or is it just whatever is meant to come up that it brings that up for you?
Well, we set the intention before the ceremony, and it can always be hard to know if your intention is actually being met because ceremonies are weird. I think your intention is always eventually met, but there's this thing where ayahuasca heals and reveals in order of priority. So like if I want to know something, there might be a lot of things I have to go through in order to eventually get that. There are things that I know will be revealed to me in the future that have to do in intentions I set a long time ago, and I haven't quite got there, but there'll sometimes be a dream that I'll have now that it had something to do with answering a question that I had like back in 2019 when I started a ceremony. So I think the medicine will take us where we intend to go, but it's going to have to go through any roadblocks that are on the way. And that I can't predict exactly what will happen in a ceremony.
Yeah. Well, you've been through so much. And do you think that doing the trauma counseling that you're doing now is part of your life purpose? It's like in alignment with what you're doing? I think it's what you're meant to be
Yeah,
doing.
it's my favorite thing to do. It's not something that I it's not something that I had as like a life goal or a life purpose. It just kind of happened. And my motivation for it is that when I was going through my dark night of the soul, as well as some of these out of body experiences, it was really challenging to find people who could understand me. Sometimes I did, but they understood a little. And I don't claim to understand everything about everybody because I don't. But usually people who resonate with what I'm talking about will find me because they know that I'm going to get something based on what I've said. So I do feel like it is my life purpose now. It's not about advertising and trying to get out to clients. It's about the right people finding me so that they can explore what's going on with them, so that they can understand their situation better, and so that they can be witnessed. Because I think that we all deserve support and witnessing when we're unraveling extremely challenging things that don't necessarily have an immediate answer.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to have the same experience to know that that the process of healing is similar. The way that we approach it, you have to look at it, you have to integrate it, whatever it looks like. It's just providing that safe space to do it in. So, Amanda, where can people get hold of you?
Yeah, I have a website, lionspiritcoaching.com. So you can contact me there. Love to hear from people, even if you're not booking coaching. Sometimes people email me and tell me about their experiences, and it's always nice to hear from people.
Oh, yeah. I will post that link below. And do you have a last message for our audience before we go?
Yeah, you know, we always think that we have a lot of time to do things that light us up, to follow our purpose and our dreams. And I experienced firsthand at 35 that my life could be taken from me in an instant. And most of the things that I actually was fascinated by, I had never dipped my finger in. I was going to wait till retirement or when the time was perfect, but the time is never right. It's never going to be perfect. So I would just say that you don't know when your last day is going to be, even if you can't do everything that you want to do or everything that fascinates you. What can you sign up for, or what email can you send, or like what down payment can you make now so that in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years you'll be so much closer and get the ball rolling, because we often just never start because it seems like it's too big, but it's actually not. You can always do one thing.
I love that. Yep. People always say, if this thing happens, then I'll be happy. When I get this, then I'll be happy. And then you just spend your life waiting for when, and you never actually get to do it. And like you say, we don't know when our time is.
No.
Man, it was a pleasure to speak with you. I am very glad that you made it to this side, to the other side and back,
Yeah.
so that you could share that inspiring story. And yeah, I'll post all your links below.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for doing this. You must talk to so many interesting people.
I love it because I get to pick your brain firsthand.
Yeah.
And I have so many questions that nobody can answer because I'm watching a video and I can't ask the question, but now I can.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing what you do. It's so great because I would never be able to share this story if it wasn't for people like you. I mean, nobody would know.
Well, that's it. And I find that a lot of people that have had NDEs feel compelled to share that story. And it is because as you do wake up, it's to show people that we're all spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yeah.
And like you say, life is short. Yeah. So enjoy it instead of living in suffering and surface level stuff that is
Yeah.
actually not even important. Yeah.